Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Metropolis Radio. Today, as the title suggests, we are going over why there was so much backlash against the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies. Now, what prompted this video is I came across this article from Game Rant here a couple of weeks ago at this point, and that is Star Trek: The Fan Backlash to the J.J. Abrams Films Explained. Now, I'm not going to read this article word for word. I did read through it, obviously, before recording this, and I feel they make a couple of good points, but they also misdiagnose some of the problems. So that's what we're going to go over. I'm going to really go over why the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies really had fan backlash. And I have 6 talking points that I want to go over. So let's obviously start with talking point number 1, and that was simply J.J. wasn't a Star Trek fan. And this is a very well-known fact at the time. I don't feel like I need to cite a source for this. This was, heavily talked about in the film's marketing. And in fact, J.J. Abrams himself tried to spin it as a positive, which if we observe it objectively, yes, it can be. Yes, not being a fan of a particular franchise and rebooting said franchise could be seen as a benefit, because now you can look at why certain filmmaker was not a fan of the franchise, and maybe they can improve it. But 9 times out of 10, it usually ends up backfiring. Right? Like, if you ask, like a non-James Bond fan wants to reboot the James Bond series, okay, what's the first thing you're going to do with your James Bond reboot? Well, I'm going to kill off James Bond in the first 5 minutes of the movie. Okay, franchise over, dum-dum. Still, like, there is a few exceptions where not being a fan of a particular franchise that you're rebooting has worked, except 90% of cases, it's always failed. So I will say that is one of the reasons why there was such a strong backlash against the J.J. Abrams movies, is because you have the head honcho, the filmmaker himself, admitting to not being a Star Trek fan. The second talking point I want to bring up is the fact that hard reboots themselves are largely unpopular, again, with a handful of exceptions. Hard reboots are not really seen as a good way of bringing an old franchise back. Typically, it's the soft reboots that are more widely regarded. Now, I'm not here to debate this right now, but if you look at the success of Cobra Kai, by comparison to the 2010 reboot of The Karate Kid, Cobra Kai was received a hell of a lot better. The biggest criticism for the 2010 reboot was that they pretty much wrote themselves into a corner. You can't really do a sequel in the vein of The Karate Kid Part 2 because you've already been to a foreign country, and you can't just simply go back to the United States, wherever Jaden Smith's character was from. I think he was from Detroit. But still, look at the long history of hard reboots. How did the reboot of Land of the Lost go? How did the reboot of Land of the Lost fare with audiences? The one with Will Ferrell and I believe Danny McBride was also in. The one that released in 2009 was obviously a reboot of the classic television show from the 70s. How did the reboot of Chips work out? What's another reboot? Oh, how did the reboot of Baywatch work out? Not well. The only comedic style, like hard reboot that really worked well, in my opinion, was 21 Jump Street. And a lot of that was simply just due to Lord and Miller. And that really was it. If you removed Lord and Miller from the 21 Jump Street reboot, that entire movie would fall apart. But still, getting back to my point, look at all of these hard reboots that have come out and have failed miserably. So don't pretend that this hard reboot of Star Trek did not lead to the fan backlash itself. The third talking point is one of my biggest, and that was the fact that Star Trek Into Darkness was simply a ripoff of The Wrath of Khan. Now, I need to put a little bit of context in here before going on. During the promotional tour promoting Wrath of Khan, J.J. Abrams and Benedict Cumberbatch both were coming out and saying, no. Benedict Cumberbatch is not playing Khan. Benedict Cumberbatch is not playing Khan. He's playing a new character named John Harrison. Well, this one scene from Wrath of Khan proved that to be complete bullshit.
John Harrison was a fiction created the moment I was awoken by your Admiral Marcus to help him advance his cause.
A smokescreen to conceal my true identity. My name is Khan.
Yeah, the fan base got lied to, and words spread. Now, sure, Star Trek Into Darkness did make more money than Star Trek 09 did, which actually proved that Star Trek 09 actually grew on the fan base. I argue that the J.J. Abrams Star Trek Backlash did not start until Star Trek Into Darkness, when the fan base was blatantly lied to, which led to Star Trek Beyond bombing at the box office. I know a lot of people point to the Star Trek Axanar drama. I don't think it was Star Trek Axanar alone. Look at how Star Trek Into Darkness was treated. We were promised that it was a completely original movie with Benedict Cumberbatch playing a new character named John Harrison. Well, you had those 4 magic words, "My name is Khan." And right then and there, it turned into basically a Chinese knockoff of The Wrath of Khan. And you know what? Calling Into Darkness a Chinese knockoff of The Wrath of Khan is actually offensive to Chinese knockoffs, because Chinese knockoffs actually try to mimic the original. Whereas Star Trek Into Darkness basically tried to do its own thing. It wanted to be a modern blockbuster, but it still was an inferior version. At least the Chinese knockoffs make it look as close to the original as they can realistically get. The fourth talking point I want to bring up is the simple fact that Star Trek is not a goddamn movie franchise. It never has been, it never will be. It started on television, right? You had the original show that ran from 66 to 69, that did really well in the reruns. Then an animated series from Filmation came out in the early 1970s, and many fans actually consider that the unofficial 4th season of Star Trek. And then the movies came out solely because of the success of Star Wars at the time. All the major studios were just digging around and seeing what old science fiction properties do we have that we can revive for the big screen, because this Star Wars movie really took off. It made a butt-fuck ton of money, and we need to capitalize on this market right now. Without the success of Star Wars, Star Trek the Motion Picture never gets made, which means Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, which is considered the best Star Trek movie ever made, never gets made. But still, it goes back to the point that Star Trek was never about the movies. It was never movies first. It was always TV shows first, movies second. Because Star Trek the Motion Picture was a continuation of the original series. Star Trek Generations was a continuation of Star Trek The Next Generation, which ran for 7 freaking seasons on television. So you reboot Star Trek as a movie with Kirk and Spock, but the last show to come out was Star Trek Enterprise, but you're not continuing the adventures of Captain Archer and how the Romulan War broke out. No, you're rebooting it with Kirk and Spock without a show coming either before it or coming after it. So effectively, J.J. Abrams turned Star Trek into a movie franchise first and a television franchise second, which still, the reboot relies on your knowledge of Kirk and Spock, but it still wants to be a reboot. So again, don't pretend that also didn't lead to Backlash. The fifth talking point I want to bring up is that these movies were more sci-fi action movies with the Star Trek branding. And this actually ties back into the first point of the fact that J.J. Abrams wasn't a Star Trek fan. Self-admitted, he was a bigger Star Wars fan than Star Trek, which explains why Star Trek 09 had a lot more action in it. Remember, boys and girls, Star Trek Nemesis was panned by both critics and audiences because it had too much action in it for a Star Trek movie. I argue Star Trek 09 had way more action sequences in that movie than Star Trek Nemesis ever frickin' did. But still, Star Trek 09 did grow on the fan base. So you add Star Trek Into Darkness in that, and yeah, you have more action scenes in those 2 movies combined than really what you had in the original 10 Star Trek movies that came out from Paramount. So again, who were these movies made for? Were the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies made for the hardcore Star Trek fans, or were they made to get a new series of fans that were never Star Trek fans to begin with? And my sixth and final talking point, because I don't want to drag this out for too long, is the fact that I argue Star Trek didn't need a reboot at all. It just needed a break. Between 1987 and 2005, at least one season of Star Trek was on television every year for 18 years. And remember, some shows ran simultaneously. Deep Space Nine and Voyager ran simultaneously. I believe... No, I do apologize. I was gonna say Voyager and Enterprise ran simultaneously, but that did not. But still, I think there were a grand total. Let's see, you had 7 seasons of The Next Generation, 7 seasons of Deep Space Nine, 7 seasons of Voyager, 4 seasons. You had 25 seasons of Star Trek air between 1987 and 2005. That's why Star Trek died the first time. It didn't die because it was bad. It died because there was simply too much of it. And then you have this hard fucking reboot that comes out just 4 years after Enterprise left the air. Again, Star Trek did not need this hard reboot with the Kelvin timeline with Chris Pine, Zachary Quinto, Zoe Saldana, Carl Urban. No, it just needed a good long break and then bring Star Trek back, but bring it back on television first and bring it back movie second. And this is why I feel that there was such a strong backlash to the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies. But most articles only touch on a couple of these points, but they don't touch on every point. And guys, I'm going to go ahead and end this video right here before I drag this out way longer than it needs to be. So if you stuck around this long, thanks so much for doing so. And if you've been following me long enough, you know I'm terrible at ending these videos, so I will just see you guys next time.